Hi, boys and girls. This is Grandma Sheila with this week's story, and it's called A Bus to Nowhere. I don't want anybody to get the impression that Juan was a man that was bored with the work he was doing. This day, he was selling Bibles and other Christian books in a Mexican state. But you have to admit that what he did was a bit unusual. It happened that Juan was going about his usual activities when he had to pass in front of the bus station. Naturally, he was in a hurry to get away from the noise and the contamination that always presented in those places. If you've ever been to a bus station at a big city, it's full of smoke from the buses and you can't hardly breathe. Well, he looked up and he saw this gigantic bus sitting there with its engine running, ready to leave. Of course, there was nothing strange or unusual about that, but for some reason, Juan turned, and without stopping to think, he got on that bus and sat down. Now, generally, if you're going to take a bus from a bus station, you pick the bus that's going where you want to go, right? Well, let's see what happened. Now, if he'd had time to think about it, he probably would have not said to himself, "What am I doing here?" and would have gotten back off of that bus. But the fact is that he no sooner sat down than the conductor shut the door on the bus and away they went. Where to? Well, Juan didn't have the faintest idea. This was a serious problem because the conductor was coming down the aisle asking each passenger, "Where to?" And as soon as he heard the answer, he would tear off the corresponding ticket and collect the fare. Seeing this, Juan started to sweat, and not precisely because of the heat. He wished he could shrink in size and become invisible. But that was impossible. He was on the bus and it was going. Soon the conductor was standing beside him, and it was Juan's turn to answer the question. Well, I don't know. That is, The conductor started to scowl. More than once he'd had crazy people on his bus, or even people that had had too much beer to drink and they were drunk. He knew how to deal with them. "What did you say?" "Speak up," said the conductor, raising his own voice as if to illustrate how to answer somebody. Suddenly, Juan's face lit up with an idea, and he dug around in his pocket until he found an undetermined amount of coins. He pulled them out and placed them in the conductor's hand, saying, "As far as I can go with this amount of money." The man shrugged. The expression on his face was eloquent, but he said nothing. I guess, 'cause at least he knew the man was paying for wherever he was going. The conductor counted out those coins. He tore off the ticket and he handed it to Juan and continued with his work. For some time, Juan sat observing the green countryside as the bus wove its way between hills and fields and sugar cane. He had begun to nod off when he felt the conductor tap him on the shoulder. "Here you are," said the man. "You've reached your destination." Standing beside the highway as the bus took off Juan looked around, completely bewildered. While he was riding along, he had begun to think that maybe the Lord was sending him to another city where he could take a lot of orders for his books and his Bibles and sell a lot of things telling about Jesus. But now he was wondering what had happened, because he was not close to any town. There was not even any houses in sight. The only other human being was a man who was rapidly disappearing in the distance. On one side of the highway, there was a cane field, and on the other, some tall vegetation. In the distance, he could hear a dog alternately barking and howling mournfully. Apart from that, there was nothing. Finally, after a bit more observation, Juan discovered a path that seemed to bore like a tunnel through the dense vegetation. And he started to follow it. Just a path. Before long, he came to a clearing and found a simple country house with stick-and-mud walls and a thatched roof. The man came out of the house shouting at his dogs to calm down before he greeted Juan, who was looking around quite surprised. If up to that point all of this had seemed like a strange dream to Juan, he was even more surprised when the man asked, "Are you the one we've been waiting for?" That was an odd question. "I don't know," said Juan. "Were you expecting someone?" "Yes, that is, well, not exactly, but I think maybe it's you." "I don't understand," said Juan. "Well, I'm not very sure either," the man said, "but I've been praying, and now I'm expecting somebody to bring me what I need." Juan looked at him and said, "What is it you need?" "Light. That is, an explanation," said the man. "It's just that someone gave my family a Bible, and we've been reading it, but there's some things I don't understand at all. For example, this is just an example of what I mean, sir. I came across the Ten Commandments. I came across the Ten Commandments in that Bible I'd been given, and I read them. And it says right there, plain and simple, that we're supposed to rest on the seventh day. I've been looking through the rest of the Bible to see where it says that we no longer need to keep the seventh day, or that the day of rest has been changed, but I've looked everywhere and I can't find any Bible verses that say anything like that." And Juan looked at him and he said, "You never will." "Why not?" said the man. "How do you know?" "Because there isn't any such text." "Why, I've been looking and looking entire days and sometimes far in the night, trying to find it where it says we should keep Sunday. And now you come and tell me that there's no such text. What do you know about the Bible anyway?" "I've read it many times," Juan said. At that, Juan saw the man's eyes fill with tears, and with a broken voice, the man said, "Then you really are the one that God sent to us." "I have no idea whatever about that," remarked Juan. "And now I'm going to ask you something. The Lord has opened your heart and mind to understand this great truth about the Sabbath. What do you plan to do about it?" "There's no need to ask me what I plan to do," the man said. "We're already doing it. For 4 months now, my wife and I have not worked on Saturday. But I have had a desire to talk with somebody. You can't imagine. But now you've come. I just can't believe it." The man was shaking his head, deeply moved, when suddenly he reacted and said, "But what are you doing out here? Do come in, please. And if you've brought the Bible, you better start pulling it out right now, because I have lots and lots of questions to ask you." All that day, this humble home in the country was illuminated by the light from heaven, the Word of God from the Bible. And not only that day, because Juan continued to visit and to instruct the fervent seeker for truth that man was. 4 months later, the man and 6 members of his family were baptized according to the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. Boys and girls, who do you think told him or just had him get on that bus when he had no destination of where he should go or what he should do when he got there? God plans ahead for our lives. He's the one that helps us do what we need to do that day. And Juan getting on that bus to nowhere was part of God's plan, because out in all that jungle, there sat that mud and stick house with a thatched roof, but a man and his family inside that had been given a Bible, and they were looking for the truth of what God wanted them to know, and they needed help. I think that God sent Juan down that path to hear those dogs barking, because he knew there would be a house there. But he didn't know exactly what he was supposed to do there. But God had already taken care of that. That man had been praying earnestly that somebody would tell him the answers to the questions he had from his Bible. And he found it in Juan when he came knocking on his door. Thank you, boys and girls. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye now.